prezentację. Right, I'll just make sure, can you see me? Can you hear me? Can you see my presentation? Can you see my screen? You can always write in the chat or just, give me thumbs up. Yeah, all good. All right, so my name is Marta Nowak. I've been teaching English for almost 18 years now. I spent almost a decade living in Spain and the UK. And since I came back to Poland, I've been working at the Warsaw University, where I teach business English at the Faculty of Economics. And I also specialize in academic writing at the Institute of History, and more recently at the Faculty of Political Sciences and International Relations. The most important thing you need to know about me, which is relevant to this presentation, is that I'm not a theorist about teaching. I'm a practitioner. I have been using Success with Business, so the new title from National Geographic Learning, with about 100 students since October. So today in this presentation, I'm going to share my experience, also feedback that I got from my students about business skills, about the book itself, and what's important to them in learning business English. If you have any questions, if you'd like me to clarify something, repeat, please feel free to interrupt me or send a message in the chat. I will be looking at the chat from time to time, but I will ask Adrian to control it while I'm speaking. And by the way, all the links to websites, all the activities, they're described in a handout that you're going to get at the end of the presentation. So today's presentation has, well, 4 parts, let's say, 3 shorter parts and 1 longer. So we'll start with talking a little bit about the nature of teaching and learning business English in the academic context at Polish universities. So this will be the time when I will ask you to tell me a little bit about your experience in that. Then the biggest part of the presentation, of the talk today, is me sharing practical ideas for lessons. These are lessons that have already happened. And the choice of those topics and those lesson ideas, that was in coordination with my students, actually. I did ask them about the topics, the lessons that they particularly enjoyed, but also found most useful. So all that is tried and tested. I'll tell you a little bit more about what the students had to say about learning business English. And finally, I'll show some features of Success with Business, of the new title. So my first question to you is, do you teach business English? Have you taught business English before? What kind of challenges does it pose to you as teachers, teaching business English at university? Do you teach? Do you have any experience in that? What kind of challenges does it pose? Please feel free to activate your microphones as well, if you'd like to share. I can see the chat as well, so I will keep looking. One person says, yes, you do teach. Now, think about different challenges, difficulties that teaching business English might pose to you as language teachers. That might be related with another question I have for you, whether you could tell me a little bit about your students. what are they like? What's their, attitude to learning business English? What's their experience? What's your experience in teaching? Okay, so Kasia is saying that the biggest challenge is engaging students in business topics not familiar to them, even in Polish. Absolutely, yes, yes. Yeah, I will be actually talking about it. Lack of understanding of economics, management, yeah. No relevant professional experience, exactly. Yes, again, no professional experience, students who don't work, yeah. Yes, so I can see that we have very similar observations and experience. Exactly, thank you very much. Right, so let's start maybe with just a tiny little bit of, well, theory. Actually, it's based on academic research. So a while ago, Evan Frendo, who specializes in teaching business English and designing materials, delivered a very interesting talk at IATEFL. It was a webinar. Anyway, he was talking about materials. He actually published a paper about materials which I used to teach business English. And he made this differentiation between the language, so business English being the language of talking about business and the language of doing business. So when we think about different materials and different contexts, so for experienced workers, for people who already have been working for a while, and let's say they have in-company classes, so for those people, the focus at that stage of their careers is actually the language of doing business. So this practical side of it, lots of problem solving, finding solutions to problems, everyday conversations found in emails, phone calls, and there's quite a lot of, functional language. So because the context is different, the needs are different, and my observation is as well that people who start working in, let's say, in corporations, they pick up the specialist language very quickly. That might be workplace specific as well. So that's what they learn quickly. They memorize the vocabulary, but what they lack is, politeness, hedging, so more interpersonal communication. So in this case, we focus more on functional language. Whereas when we think about most, let's say, even most course books with, long reading texts, which are full of specialized vocabulary, or asking students to explore, different books, interviews, videos, and so on, those materials very often focus on successes, business success, and some positive developments. They're more, let's say, descriptive in nature, and they contain that kind of vocabulary that could be studied. Now, in the university context, I believe that, well, our role as teachers is to make sure that we offer both. We actually need to offer both, so teach the language or provide access to real language to talk about business, but also to provide situations in which students can use the language of doing business. That's the tricky part, I think. That's where, the lack of work experience is most evident. That requires quite, let's say, more scaffolding to do the tasks and more imagination and creativity. Now, let's focus on the business English learner at university. So Evan Frendo talks about the pre-experience learner. So the description I've got here is actually based on my observation and experience. So things that you have already mentioned in the chat, and I hope you agree with, the pre-experienced learner has either no or very little work experience. Especially now during the pandemic, it's even harder for students to find part-time jobs. Their options are limited, and I think it's noticeable as well this year. Pre-experienced learners also have quite limited knowledge about the business world. So they might have heard things from their parents or other family members, maybe some friends, from TV as well. But they don't even what they follow on social media, on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. That's not really related to business or the business world in general. That means that when they start their education at university, very often they don't really have a clear idea of what business English is. They might have heard things about, oh, there are difficult topics, or there will be, they might have some ideas that actually are not very true. That may lead to having very unrealistic expectations of the learning outcomes. So you might have students who, their idea is that at the end of the year, they will be able to, I don't know, write a complicated report, financial report. Someone else may think that, oh, I'll be able to have, great negotiations in English. So the lack of previous knowledge about what business English might involve, it actually might create such expectations. And one more thing that I have noticed is that even compared to general English classes, some students might actually have lower motivation, and this is what you said in the chat, that's related to the lack of their personal experience, and the fact that they kind of cannot connect the dots between what they, let's say, read in a business English course book and their lives. Lots of things are very abstract. And let's face it, well, I have used different materials, different course books, and sometimes some course books are simply directed at a different type of learner, the experienced one, someone who will easily discuss a case study. Some course books have more even psychological approach to business. So that's a difficulty, and I think that's what lowers students' motivation. I'm not quite sure about your university, but at the University of Warsaw, at the Faculty of Economics, every student has to do at least 2 terms of business English. Since this is obligatory, that's also a factor in lowering motivation in some students. All these things create certain implications. The question, okay, so what should I do as a teacher? So what it means for teachers, and again, I'm talking from my experience, is first of all, combining the language of talking about business with the language of doing business. Another thing is that I think that it should be explained very clearly at the beginning of the year. Since this is something really new to most students, and when they sign up for those classes and they go to the USOS system and they read the syllabus, some of them do, not many, but this is not enough. I think that the first few lessons at every business English course at university are quite crucial to, to establish the right report and to establish, okay, sorry, I'm just looking at the chat. Technical problems. Can you hear me well? Sorry, Agnieszka is asking. Okay, I'll wait. Okay, So that might be, all's good. Sorry about the break. I just want to make sure that everybody, okay, everybody can hear. All right. That might depend on the device you're using as well. Okay, anyway, this is being recorded, so hopefully you can come back to it. Right, so again, the first few lessons are quite important. And some things, you know, if we have quite a lot of experience in teaching business English and some things are obvious to us, they're not obvious to our students. So quite a lot of explanation. I think that's very useful. Another step is negotiating the syllabus, up to some extent, of course, you know, but asking students, you know, giving them a choice, let's say, a choice of 20 topics, asking them to rank the topics in terms of how useful they think the topics might be for them. Asking students what their idea of business English is. I'm not saying using it, you know, like all together, but that communication at the beginning of the course is actually quite important. I've noticed that giving this chance to students, that's one of the elements that actually helps to raise motivation. Another implication is helping students to connect the dots, helping them to find connections between business topics and their lives. There is a lot of, like I said before, a lot of imagination required. What do you know, a lot of speculation, so conditionals, there you go. What do you think you could possibly do if you were working in, if the situation, that's one of the elements, but lots of materials can be actually nicely adapted to students' life. And I'm going to show you examples of that. In my classes, I give most importance to topics which are most relevant to university students. So one of those processes that every student goes through in my class is writing their CV, cover letter, and taking part in a job interview. More details about it in a minute. And the last point, the last implication is trying to inspire curiosity. It might be tough with some business topics. And to be honest, when I started working at Warsaw University and my first encounter with supply chain or mergers and acquisitions, I just personally, I didn't find those topics interesting. But what I project in the classroom to my students, you know, they can see it, they can feel it, that if the teacher is not interested in the topic, then, you know, why should they be? So I've changed my approach and decided to go through the process of learning more about business together with my students. I genuinely try to be curious, to learn more about the supply chain, about mergers and acquisitions. Every single time, you know, the approach towards a topic makes a lot of difference. And the final thing is engaging students as much as possible. Learner autonomy is extremely important to me. It is, you know, I know it depends on the trust. Yes, there will be students who won't work as hard as we want them to, but those who can see the potential, they will use it and they will do much more than required. So the practical ideas that I'm going to share with you, I've chosen 8 topics. Initially, I had about 12. Couldn't decide which ones, but because of the time limit, I had to focus on those. Now, all these topics, all those lessons are based on, they are inspired by Success with Business. What you can see on the slide is the cover of C1 level. However, the ideas, I teach 2 levels, I mean, in theory at least, B2 and C1. I said in theory because the truth is that I do have a range of levels from A2 to C2 among my students, but these are the 2 course books I use, B2 and C1. So you'll see examples from both. So all those topics, they are inspired by Success with Business. You'll see more authentic materials, combining the language of doing business and talking about business, developing both language and business skills. Like I said before, all of these lessons have happened. And they were enjoyed by students. I know that because I asked my students to complete a questionnaire about that. Now, a few words about the system in which I work. So I teach on 60-hour courses, 60 hours a term. We were given the choice and, well, the option of having one synchronous class a week and one asynchronous. So for live classes, I use Zoom. And the rest happens on Google Classroom. So there is one online and one, I call it offline lesson a week, which means that when we meet online for an hour and a half a week, my aim is to maximize speaking opportunities for students. All right, so here are the topics that I have chosen. So the first 3 are connected. All of my students have done business presentations as well. We talked about describing jobs, mergers and acquisitions as well. The economy, and a very, very general topic, but you'll see some specific ideas, and banking. So let's start with the first 3. It doesn't really matter what the level of the students is, the language level. All of my students have gone through the process of creating their real CVs. That's important, not fake ones for, you know, imagine you're applying for a job as a firefighter at the Faculty of Economics. So creating real CVs, showing them how LinkedIn works, how to create a student profile on LinkedIn, how to write a proper cover letter, what to avoid, and simulating a job interview with real questions as well. So I'm going to start with showing you the end product of a series of 3 lessons. So 2 online lessons and 1 offline lesson. So these are examples of CVs that my students have written. As you can see, both have profile summaries, they have some work experience, education, you know, they look very professional, I must say. At the end of the process of preparing students to write CVs, I was really impressed by how professional their CVs were and how much effort they put into it. And they were really motivated because they were doing the real thing. That's, you know, this is the basis for building their professional CVs in the future. But in terms of business skills, something real and something motivating. So what were the steps? Well, the first step was actually using the course book. This is C1 level. So this short text, it offers 3 personal summaries. So that's the element that I asked my students to develop in their CVs. So we've got 3 examples, excellent source for useful phrases. teaching them about how they could describe themselves in a few sentences, what kind of effect it may have on a potential employer. So a little bit of analysis and evaluation here as well. So critical thinking skills, another important element. Another task, underlining which elements should be included in a CV. Actually, this turned into quite a long discussion on the professional environment. For instance, there was a big issue with having a photograph in your CV, whether you should have it or not, how it works in different countries. So again, practical knowledge. The two activities here are quite eye-opening when students learn that recruitment specialists spend less than 60 seconds looking at the CV. So apart from very useful information, again, there's a lot of useful language to take away and use in their CVs and summaries. So another step in the process was creating a LinkedIn profile. It really, I don't force students to do it. I recommend it. The profile doesn't have to be completed with lots of details. However, it can be used for other purposes, apart from looking for a job, maybe not right now, but in the future, this is a good starting point to get more knowledge about the business world. Fantastic materials on building a great student profile. So in the handout, you have a link to this as well. Professionally done. It can be turned into a separate lesson, lots of great vocabulary and just real practical knowledge. So creating a profile on LinkedIn, like I said, it's not only about potentially searching for a job, but it's about expanding the knowledge on the world of business. So in real life, the best LinkedIn profiles actually happen in this way, right? So when you set up your own profile, even if it's not completed yet, you choose different companies. So most of my students went for Microsoft, following Microsoft, Bill Gates, seeing the updates, seeing their profiles, job descriptions, finding experts, finding possible mentors as well. I teach them, look, if there is someone who's someone you would like to be like, you would like to work in this place just like this person does, send them a message, connect with them, ask them if they could mentor you. So do business in real life, take first steps. And yeah, in real life, this is how the best profiles are created. So you visit profiles of different people, see how they have done it, and then you create yours. Great lesson on the difference between plagiarism and noting down useful language. So we've got LinkedIn here. Now, another fantastic source that I have used myself to create my CVs is ZT. Which actually is a Polish company. So ZT started as a little startup in a small flat in Warsaw years ago. They started as interviewme.pl. Right now they have grown, they've got the same service in English and they're global. So showing students this particular website, how they can create their CVs online. There is a career blog, how to write cover letters. Fantastic source, and the link is also in the handout. So another step was reading about how to write, how to create a student resume or student CV. Again, same website. Now, Interview Me and ZT, same thing. Interview Me is in Polish, ZT is in English. These are the websites where actually you need to pay a little bit if you want to download your CV, but I think there's a trial period for free. Altogether, all my students, well, maybe not all, but some of my students signed up, they created their accounts there. However, they can, using the knowledge taken from these websites, they might as well write their CVs in a Word document, and that's fine as well. Right, the next step in the journey, taking the students closer to the business world, is writing a cover letter. So this time we started with an offline lesson task. These are actually copied instructions from Google Classroom. So they had to read about how to write a cover letter from ZT, make notes about how to organize the letter, and write useful expressions. This is a sample students' work. So these were my instructions in a Google document together with the link to the website. And that was for B2 students. So they had to read all the information, summarize it. As you can see, this is quite nicely done, actually, in terms of noticing the structure, understanding the structure. So that's a sample answer, and we've got some nice language here that the student decided to take away. So that was the first step, being exposed to, well, real business language, real business English and the real world. And then the next step was using the course book. Using the course book, so in class, we summarized what they have learned from the website, in terms of structure and organization, just simply information that is up to date, 2021. Actually, yes, 2021. And then we used the knowledge to not only do the grammar task. Previously, there was a revision of past tenses, but also students used their knowledge from the offline lesson to evaluate the sample letter that is in the book. So again, critical thinking skills integrated into the lesson. At the end of the class, they did some planning. Before they were asked to write the actual letter, they could talk to each other about how they would organize information in the letter. In the case of this task, also they had the chance to produce a different letter for a different job advertisement. So, well, as you can imagine, students with, let's say, lower language level, they chose this one because, well, they've got some prompts, they've got some information, and stronger students just wrote, letters, cover letters for different jobs. Now, so we've got CVs, we've got cover letters, and the third step that every student should go through is job interviews. This turned out to be one of the favorite lessons in the whole course, actually, first term. So when I asked my students to, before today's presentation, they had a questionnaire to complete, and one of the questions was, so which lesson do you remember from last term? Which business skills? What did you learn? So that's what one of my students said, the one with popular and tricky interview questions. When we were working in groups and were trying to answer these questions, we had a lot of fun. The monotonous, quite boring topic became the funny one. So what were the steps? How did we do it? We actually started with the course book. In this case, did a little bit of grammar revision of indirect questions, definitely useful in the context of job interviews. We had a chat about their experience in job interviews, what they know, what they've heard, also what they know about recruitment. I asked them to visit websites of different companies to check the recruitment process, the stages. That actually led to, again, great topic to explore is the use of artificial intelligence in the recruitment process. But that's off topic now. So we talked about job interviews in general in class, and rather than simulating an interview to be, maybe a restaurant manager or a web designer, I wanted them to have a more, real life experience, something that would be more relevant to them. So the next step in preparation for next lesson was editing one document where they would copy and paste, that's fine, questions they found online, questions for job interviews. So I decided to have 3 categories: weird or strange questions, so-called killer questions, and behavioral questions, another very common common type of job interview questions. By the way, my students love memes, so we had quite a few funny ones too. So let me show you examples of questions that my students found. Why do pigs have curly tails? This one has become just iconic. One of the groups I teach, I think we ended up spending about 20 minutes trying to answer this question without any Google search. Then one of the students did the search. He also used Google Scholar to find academic sources. And the anecdote is that until this day, so what is it, 6 months later, he still receives notifications about academic papers related to the topic. Right, so another weird, strange question. Do you ever feel like a plastic bag? A killer question. What's your greatest weakness? And funnily enough, the answer should not be, I'm a perfectionist. Another one, if you were a drink, what kind of drink would you be and why? I'm still thinking about the answer, to be honest. What else? This one is actually an example from Google interview, if you want to work at Google. So there were lots and lots of similar questions. And one more, a behavioral one, describing a situation where you needed to persuade someone to see things your way. So there was the document with questions was really, really long. So that happened before class. And in class, so first students worked in small groups, and they selected some questions and they tried to answer them. They did have lots of fun while doing it. And the final step of the whole process was actually having interviews in pairs. So students had to decide the jobs they were applying for. I encouraged them to exchange the CVs that they'd written previously and use some of the questions to, just to get the experience. Lots of fun and just real life skill. Again, ZT comes in handy because in the career blog about job interviews, there are excellent posts with great advice on how to answer different questions. So if you're curious about, how to answer what is your greatest weakness, just go for it. Now, moving on to the 4th idea, presentations. This is an example. These are tasks from Success with Business B2. What I particularly like about it, that it teaches the structure very, very clearly. And that's one of the most important aspects of any presentation. So combining the steps with the 3 rules, or actually it's 1 rule: tell them what you're going to tell them what you've told them, understanding it and using useful language here, that makes a lot of difference. So the activities in the book, again, they served as inspiration and inspiration for further discussion, also talking about the differences between presenting in front, well, I call it a 3D audience, and presenting online. And what I asked my students to do when they had their presentation topics, I asked them to record their presentations. Simply, that helps to avoid, problems with the connection when presentations are done live. So they all recorded short presentations. They uploaded them on Google Classroom. But to have this element of interaction, other students could ask questions and comment on them. So using the activity from the book was actually a great idea, especially for pre-experienced learners, because it's about creating your dream company. However, I decided to take it one step further and encourage my students to have a more academic approach to their business presentations. One of the best sources of information on academic presentations is the website of Hull University. Lots of practical ideas about the structure, the design, presenting itself, software, and for their academic careers, perhaps later on, more about academic conferences, academic posters. So lots and lots of useful information. So to create a bigger challenge, I asked my students to choose a business topic, but to search for materials, even using Google Scholar to start with. So have a more academic perspective on that. That worked really, really well as well. Okay, moving on. You can see the time. I knew that was ambitious, but okay, anyway. So B2 level, talking about jobs. I'm not sure about your students, but when I ask mine, so do you have any idea what you would like to do in the future, where you would like to work? Most of them say, no, I have no idea. So a task in the book, thinking about the job you once did, I thought, let's change it, let's alter it a little bit. Now, mind you, in Success with Business, and that's a fantastic feature, most activities have alternative versions for pre-experienced learners. So you don't need to spend ages thinking about, how am I going to do this task with my students if they have no work experience? In this particular case, there was no alternative, but I found it easily. So another fantastic website, prospects.ac.uk. I am not aware of a similar website in Polish, but this one is amazing. So it contains lots and lots of information on career advice, on choosing jobs, on job descriptions, what kind of responsibilities different jobs involve, and so on. So the first step, everything was done it was the offline lesson, so the asynchronous bit. So students had to do the quiz. The quiz for a proficient language user takes up to 10 minutes. I recommend you do it, it's fun. For students who needed to use the dictionary, I would say maximum half an hour. So The quiz, actually, to find your perfect job matches, has 4 steps. You decide, like, the answers are related to, the questions actually are related to your skills, motivations, and desires. Once you've done the test, you can see your matches. Funnily enough, that was one of mine. I did the test myself, the quiz, the test, the quiz. English as a foreign teacher, language teacher. And now, every single job has information on the responsibilities, possible salary. Yes, this is the UK context, but just encourage your students to find more information about the reality in Poland or any other country where they would like to work. What kind of skills you need, what kind of qualifications, work experience, and so on. So combining these two, the task from the book and the quiz, I asked my students to complete the chart, to complete the quiz. First of all, choose their 3 matches, top matches, and answer the questions. So this particular student, because this is again a sample of my students' work, so this student decided to note down vocabulary as well. We can see translation, fine, why not? The question was, what are your chosen top 3 professions? Would you consider any of them? We've got a nice short answer here. That was a B2 level, links to the job profiles. And apart from that, I asked students to summarize. There's much more information on the website. So actually they need to go through all of it, pick, ideally paraphrase, but even if it's, a little bit of copying and pasting, they're still exposed to authentic language. If they, again, motivation to do this task was quite high. Most students found it very interesting, helpful in just considering, considering what they might do in the future. So they did it in writing, and in class they worked in groups, in small groups where they had to present their findings, they had to talk about their choices. Very good lesson, very nice thing to teach comparatives and superlatives, well, to revise them, to use them actually. So I asked them some extra questions in groups. Real task, real language, authentic, motivation high. Now, topic number 6. I'm trying to move on fast. Mergers and acquisitions. So before the class, just to create some kind of, to create interest, to create this genuine curiosity in the topic, students had to, find some materials. They had to answer questions. That was also set up on Google Classroom in a Google document, so I could see the answers. I could actually check which companies they have chosen and whether it was a simple copy and paste, which sometimes happens, and then they get told off for that, or whether they actually, read, summarized it in their own words. So that was the first step. The second step, again, that step was inspired by the topic in the book. In this case, we've got a really nice text. It was, what's his name? The CEO of LinkedIn, so Jeff Weiner. That was the letter he wrote to his employees. At the same time, this is not mentioned in the instructions, but when the actual takeover of LinkedIn happened, he gave a very emotional speech to his employees as well. That speech can be found online. Very nice example of authentic language. This text contains lots and lots of up-to-date real language. One of the worst things that may happen when learning from outdated business English materials is that students memorize phrases which are no longer used in the office where they start working, or the materials talk about palm tops years ago, or outdated marketing strategies. Business English books have to be updated constantly. Otherwise, my personal opinion, they might do some harm to the students. So a bit of internet research, summarizing case studies, actually, nice discussion on mergers and acquisitions using the authentic example from takeover of LinkedIn. That actually, again, led me to taking it one step further and introducing academic articles gradually. So this particular academic article is actually quite short. It's about 9-10 pages plus references. And I thought it would be a good example to start exposing students, also B2 level and lower levels, exposing students to authentic academic language. Because sooner or later, they will be using academic sources. So I decided not to analyze this article in detail, but turn it into a vocabulary project. So I gave a bit of training into distinguishing between what kind of vocabulary is general academic English, so even words like conduct research, examine, identify, and so on, and language that is more subject or discipline specific. So mergers and acquisitions or human factors, yes, that's related to the topic. The end result was something like that. Again, this is a sample, so I teach my students as well how to reference properly. So this is, one of the first steps, summarizing the article in 1 to 3 sentences, and then it's the student's choice what type of vocabulary they want to include in the project. So that's based on, this particular topic, mergers and acquisitions, and this particular article was just a practice task because I actually introduced the academic vocabulary project with all my groups. C1 students had to find 6 academic articles within their academic interests and complete the charts, or it could be an Excel sheet. Students took it to different levels. They created Quizlet sets with all the vocabulary. Very, very successful project, and that's the feedback I got from the students. Some things they said was, actually the project helped me read and understand academic articles in mathematics. I feel more confident about them now. So mergers and acquisitions, that particular article, you also have a link in the handout. That's the first step. Now, very quickly, 2 more topics. The economy. Very broad, but this particular one actually focuses on describing the economic situation in your country. So I thought that it could be a very nice lesson, very nice opportunity to discuss the socioeconomic situation in Poland. Turns out, not all students, that's what you said before, sorry, in the chat about, different problems. The students don't have the knowledge, even in their native language and about their native country. So I used this topic as an opportunity to learn more about the welfare state. Asking students, are all countries welfare states? Encouraging students to learn more about how the welfare state works in Poland. even exploring how the 500+ program works, finding more information about it, yeah, to build their knowledge and to be able to explain it in English. Now, so talking about the welfare state and different benefits, that led to a debate, a proper debate on the topic of universal basic income. Another fantastic website, economics.org, simplified economics. So the particular topic of UBI, excuse me, we've got the explanation of the concept. This is, you know, a screenshot, a chart with pros and cons, but the arguments are actually really nicely explained. So first, I asked my students to read all the information, to read the arguments, and then think. They had to think, they had to decide individually what their position on the topic was. Having that position, having evaluated these arguments, actually resulted in a very interesting debate between students. Again, they were prepared because they were exposed to the language and to possible arguments. And as a follow-up, of course, great example of an argumentative essay. And finally, last but not least, banking. So the financial crash of 2008, turns out that students at the Faculty of Economics, they don't really know the details. So if you want to encourage your students to learn more about the financial crash, tell them to watch The Big Short, the film, The Big Short. But this is, of course, just one source of the knowledge. Now, the listening here very nicely explains what happened and what we learned. Of course, not in sufficient detail. I was lucky enough to have a student who was an expert on the financial crisis and actually gave a presentation. Well, I can't say it, he wanted to. Anyway, now, but this question, is it easy to get credit in your country? Turned out to be a killer question. They have no idea. So I asked them to find out and to learn. So in terms of developing language skills and the language itself, terminology, again, you've got the link to mortgage terminology, where everything is explained. I asked them to search for information. How easy is it to get a mortgage? What kind of conditions need to be met? Intentionally, I asked them to do it in Polish as well. Why? Well, one of the reasons is that a lot is, you know, that mediation in language learning is a hot topic. And another reason is that once our students start working in the business world, they will be code switching constantly. So they might be writing an email in English and then having a coffee with their colleague, chatting in Polish and talking about the email they wrote in English, or the other way around. So it's about connecting the dots. It's about, you know, giving them opportunities to do the code switching as well in the business context. Yeah, the bank appointment simulation, that was fun as well. Very eye-opening lesson for young people. All right, I am very sorry. I know it's 4 minutes past. Just final summary. So feedback from the students. When I ask them what kind of business skills are most useful, speaking and writing, making good impressions at interviews, ability of putting forward reasonable arguments when speaking, texting with somebody. This one is nice, understanding what's inside the mind of a potential employer. Not quite sure if the course provided them with this information, but perhaps. And the ability to read English articles about business English, and finally creating CVs and job interviews. Now, again, that was a questionnaire. I told my students, look, I will be talking to a group of teachers about business English. What advice would you give them? So discussing various topics. It's not good only because of the fact that it avoids making lessons boring, but also can help students to choose their later professional path. I think that is relating to prospects.ac.uk. Don't stick straight to the books, engage your students. Again, engage your students, focus on developing speaking skills, preparing students to using English in work lives. I might have been one of the first teachers in Poland to use those course books. So also ask students to give me some feedback about the course book. That's what they said. Clarity, interesting topics, relevant texts. 20-year-olds saying that the texts are relevant, good achievement. Full of useful things related to business topics, practical and clear. Tasks are easy to understand, updated information, useful vocabulary. So that's, that's what the students think about the course book. This is success with business is much more than that. As a teacher, I must say, so far, so good. It's been a pleasure to work with this business book. And I mean, it was my choice. I know I'm doing a bit of marketing here, but as a teacher, from teacher to teachers, it's a pleasure to work with this book. Very inspiring, and the fact that everything is so fresh is really good. So I mentioned it before, in the teacher's book, you will find instructions for alternative activities for pre-experienced learners, up-to-date topics, online access for teachers. Don't really have time to show you that. I have a screenshot just to show you. If you use Microsoft Teams, you will be happy to know that the platform where you have access to the book is connected with OneNote. So whatever you highlight in the book automatically is copied to OneNote, which you can use in Teams. You can download the audio, no CDs anymore. That's available for students as well. Word list, workbook, and also something I like about the book is preparation to the business English exam. More language work. Actually, this is great for assessment. If just collecting points, giving grades, even based on that. Right, this is final screenshot. That's what the online book looks like. There is a notebook. You can make flashcards. Very easy to navigate. Very, very pleasant to use. And this is all from me. If you need to know more about the book, please contact Adrian or Adrian. Right now, before we finish, I will send you the handout in the chat. And of course, I will also ask Adrian to send it by email. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marta. Now let me switch